The idea of hell, as many Christians have thought of it throughout the ages, is not something you're going to find in the Hebrew Bible. Yet when Jesus starts talking about hell to his first century Jewish audience, the concept required no introduction. That is because Jesus was not talking about the Christian hell, but of the Jewish concept of Gehenna. And using hell as the translation for the Greek word Gehenna in the Synoptic Gospels is often very unhelpful. Gehenna is a transliteration of the Hebrew Hinnom, the Valley of Hinnom. I visited the Hinnom Valley many years ago. It's located just outside the Old City in Jerusalem. It was the middle of a scorching hot day, but ironically, the valley provided some shade and a light breeze which cooled me down nicely. However, it wasn't always that pleasant because the Hinnom Valley was the site where children were sacrificed in fire to Baal and Molech, including by kings Ahaz and Manasseh, for which the valley became notorious. Jeremiah takes up the theme of this valley in relation to God's judgment. For example, in Jeremiah 7, where it is stated that the Valley of Ben-hinnom will be called the Valley of Slaughter, with the carcasses of this people being food for the birds of the sky and the beasts of the earth. So God would turn this valley, the site of their sin, into the site of their judgment and destruction, a valley of slaughter. This judgment relates to the idolatry of the people, but earlier in this chapter there is also talk of other sins regarding justice, oppressing the widow, theft, adultery, and so on. Also in this chapter and elsewhere in Jeremiah, God's wrath and fury are described as an unquenchable fire. So we can see how this imagery underpins the development of Gehenna, starting with it being the location of passing children through fire, and subsequently God's judgment for this and other sins, and its association with God's wrath being an unquenchable fire. The final verse of Isaiah became a key passage that was linked to the Valley of Hinnom. They shall go out and gaze on the corpses of the men who rebelled against me. Their worms shall not die, nor their fire be quenched. They shall be a horror to all flesh. Here we have the righteous seeing the burning corpses of those who rebelled against God. During the intertestamental period, these sort of images were expanded upon in apocalyptic literature, such as the Book of Enoch, starting the development of hellscapes and fiery punishment in the afterlife. A portrayal beyond the scope of the Hebrew Bible, possibly under the influence of Persian and Greek concepts of hell, which by then had been encountered. These may have been meant as symbolic apocalyptic imagery rather than a literal roadmap of the afterlife. And that imagery relates to judgment for sin, just like we see in the book of Revelation. And all these ideas were further expanded upon in later Christianity and Judaism after the time of Jesus. But now we have some background for what Jesus is referring to in the Synoptic Gospels, when he says in Mark that if your hand or foot cause you to stumble, you should cut it off. And if your eye causes you to stumble, tear it out. It is better for you to enter the kingdom of God with one eye than to have two eyes and to be thrown into Gehenna, where the worm never dies and the fire is never quenched. That final portion of Jesus' words being taken straight from that final verse of Isaiah we read earlier. There appears to be a significant amount of hyperbole here, but 2 points of note. Firstly, Gehenna here is presented as the punishment for sin rather than for having the wrong beliefs. And secondly, Jesus does not endlessly teach how all the Romans or pagans are off to Gehenna. No, he often seems to address these warnings to those who follow God and listen to his teachings, for example, those people listening during the Sermon on the Mount. But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, you fool, you will be liable to the Gehenna of fire. And there is other fiery imagery surrounding judgment in the same vein. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will collect out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all evildoers, and they will throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Gehenna appears to serve to motivate people, especially those who follow God, to improve how they act. After all, do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear him who can destroy both soul and body in Gehenna. And Gehenna is different to Sheol in the Hebrew Bible, sometimes translated as the grave or the pit, which seems to be the realm of the dead, which everyone ends up in upon death. Sheol in the Hebrew Bible was translated in the Greek Septuagint as Hades, which the King James Version then often rendered as hell, just to confuse things, but it is a very different concept to Gehenna. Unfortunately, hell has been weaponized by Christians over the ages in a way that is not in keeping with the background that it came from in the Hebrew Bible, and also in a way that is not in keeping with how Jesus used the concept in the Synoptic Gospels, which I think is a major error. But of course, all of this is just my opinion. Definitely let me know what you think in the comments.